welcome to today's panel discussion on sustainable construction. We are going to talk about green cement, apart from other methods, modern methods of construction. I don't like to call them modern anymore because they should be the ones that we should be using, right? So yesterday, flying in to Riyadh, I was reflecting on Saudi Vision 2030. And for me, and I don't know about you guys, but it isn't about just the economic transformation, but it's about how we are reshaping the way we build, right? And when I look at the construction industry, and I think we all agree, we are the highest emitter industry in the world. Especially concrete, is the largest contributing to carbon emissions, around 8%, and also landfill waste. And then on the latter, Saudi's ambitious targets to 2030 is to divert 95% of the landfill, of the waste from landfill, which is I don't know about you guys, but it's a massive target. Just they need to reach by 2030, that 95%. Landfill diversion. So I think the way forward is very clear. We need to rethink, especially materials, on the way, and the way we build. So today, as Julian said, we are going to talk about how we can balance performance and cost while integrating sustainable materials. What are the biggest challenges in transitioning to greener concrete, and how can we overcome them? And most importantly for me is the collaboration part, right? So how can developers, contractors, and suppliers can collaborate to scale up sustainable materials and sustainable modern methods of construction? So we are here with us, these three great gentlemen. So let's start with José Barquero, Chief Commercial Officer at CRDC Global, who is transforming plastic waste into a valuable construction material called Resin 8, contributing to a circular economy. I hope you explain a little bit more about this this morning. Thank you very much. All the way from Costa Rica, by the way. Then we have Hussam Ali, Director of Modern Methods of Construction at ROSHN, leading the way in sustainable community development and offsite construction, and Fahad Siddiqui, if I'm pronouncing correctly.
Bingo, you get 5 out of 5 for that.
Perfect, that's great. CEO of AMAQ, pushing for sustainable real estate development while, I will say, balancing the cost, performance, and regulatory requirements. What I learned about you, Fahad, is that you are here a contractor, and back in UAE you are a developer, so you are wearing both hats, which is going to be very handy.
Best of both worlds.
Okay, that's good. Right, so let's crack on with it. Okay, so how we have structured the panel today is on 3 main topics. So the first topic that I would like to address is understanding the landscape. And Jose, I will start with you. Coming back to my reflection, flying in yesterday about Saudi Vision 2030 of, reducing, 95% landfill diversion and a major reduction in actually carbon emissions in construction, so the embodied carbon. Knowing that, given CRDC's work in turning plastic waste into construction material, how does Resin 8 contribute to these goals, and what are the challenges that you have faced in expanding into new markets?
Okay. Well, hello everyone. I'm very honored to be here and sharing the stage with all of you. CRDC closely aligns to Saudi Arabia's Vision 2030. By manufacturing a product we call Resin 8, we use plastic polymers recovered from waste streams. So by doing so, we actually help to divert a lot of waste that can be ending up in landfill or polluting the environment. And also we help by reducing the dependency on imports and mining. So just to explain a little bit more about Resin 8. So basically we get all the plastic waste as a raw material, and we give it a functional and economic value by converting it or transforming it into a lightweight synthetic aggregate. And it actually looks exactly the same as a natural aggregate, and it performs the same. So when you think about the entire sustainable benefits, there are not only trade-offs. You know, the product actually has the technical performance, and it improves concrete and asphalt. So when we talk about concrete, it actually makes the concrete, well, first of all, it looks exactly the same, as I said before. It also makes it much more insulating. It makes it durable. It makes it lighter, so it makes that the transportation there's a cost saving around that. And when we talk about asphalt, it makes roads less longer and require less maintenance. So immediately you get a reduction in the carbon embodied. And the second question was around challenges.
Yeah.
So the adoption of this technology in new markets, it's often stemmed by regulatory approvals and also supply chain logistics, and I think everyone can relate with this, but just the resistance of people to making the change. So we worked very closely to governments, to regulatory bodies, and we worked through these markets also with hand-to-hand with industry leaders. So Saudi Arabia actually is not the exception, and by the Vision 2030, it makes it a very interesting environment for us and this technology.
What I just want to summarize, so the waste of one industry becomes the input to another industry, which is, I think, is a great value proposition for Saudi Arabia, right? Especially with the Vision 2030 that we mentioned. And also, I think I don't know if you explained, but you are already in 4 countries, so it's very scalable. The operation is very scalable. The technology is proven already, you know, and I think it will be great to maybe expand a little bit on that before we move into the next question.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So, well, we have a global strategy. We call it 2020 Vision. And it's basically establishing 20 plants in 20 different cities in the world. We have specific criteria to look into those key markets. And each one of the plants have the annual capacity of processing any type of plastic waste up to 20,000 tons. So we want to have a footprint established of 400,000 tons annually. And we are building this expansion by a JV model. So we look into these new markets. We go and work it out with local partners. And right now, we already have 4 plants in the world. We have 1 in Costa Rica, 1 in the United States, 1 in South Africa, and 1 in Australia. And we are looking very insistently now into this specific market and the region. So we're trying to create our pathway and viability into this market, and also look into key locations inside this region. So what we want to do is that we want to bring this technology very near to the entire industry. So we can, make the supply chain much more efficient and create not only the environmental and economical impact, but we also want to create a social impact. So we look into a triple bottom line approach.
Yeah.
Yes.
Great. So you mentioned about regulatory approvals when it comes to challenges, expanding
Yes.
into new markets. I would like to shift now the question to Hussam. Large-scale developers like ROSHN, obviously, for me, and I think for all of us, have a massive influence into setting standards when it comes to material, when it comes to sustainable modern methods of construction, the way that you want the contractor to build, right, that aligns with your vision. What has been your biggest challenge in integrating these sustainable materials and methods into your developments?
Right, thank you, Zulema. It's great to be here. Just before we start, just to kind of shed some light on the spectrum that is known as modern methods of construction. So MMC is a term coined in the UK, and it basically describes 7 major categories of construction methodologies. And all of them, they serve, their primary purpose is to render the construction process more efficient and, of course, more sustainable. So in these 7 buckets, you start on that spectrum with 2D panelized systems, 3D full volumetric solutions. They might be fully finished or partially finished in a factory setting. You have additive technologies like 3D printing. And one of the buckets is, of course, optimization of existing methodologies. And that could literally mean optimizing even traditional cast in situ construction. For example, when you introduce green cement to that building methodology that's cast in situ, you're optimizing that, you're rendering it more environmentally favorable, and so on. So, as I said, modern methods, they all serve the primary purpose is to render things more efficient on the site. So how can we build faster? How can we build with less labor on site? How can we build with less environmental impact on our environment, and so on? So the 3 primary, benefits to sustainability is, first of all, we're reducing wastage. There's a school of thought that says 30 to 60% reduction in waste obtained. You also have carbon footprint reductions, because most of these 7 categories that I described to you, they're primarily off-site based. So you have manufacturing element to them, where you come and pre-manufacture as much as you can of the built asset in a factory environment, and then you ship it to the site. And that process by itself saves you a lot of transportation and cost, environmental impact, and so on. And finally, the construction timelines. When we reduce construction timelines by up to 50%, you have less environmental impact, less pollution, less disturbance to the immediate environment around the construction site, and so on. But to go back to your question, also to highlight, Zulema, the biggest challenge is, which comes first, the chicken or the egg, in a local supply chain landscape that is pretty much not as evolved as mature markets like the Southeast Asia or the Far East or the UK market, for example. And I think the best way to go about that is to have a collaborative framework where government works with the private sector. So I come from a real estate background. So what we're very busy doing in ROSHN is building the foundations of more sustainable methods of construction and of delivery. So we're building from the ground up. We're looking at the way we design. We're looking at design efficiencies. We're looking at green cement, introducing green cement, and so on. But we also need the support from top down, so that it takes 2 to tango. So there is a lot of traction in the market. We're hearing a lot of MOUs and a lot of big joint ventures coming online, and I know that there's a lot of companies that are localizing now their green cement production in Saudi Arabia. So I think within a couple of years, we'll be hearing wonderful stories about that picking up.
So just to summarize, you want obviously the support from the government showing that, leading the way towards this is the way that the country should be shaping the construction. But also, I will say, are you the chicken or the egg? So ROSHN for me, imagine, is the chicken. So for me, ROSHN should be the one saying no, guys, this is how we want to build. Yeah. Therefore, contractors, and now I'm going with you, Fahad, should kind of comply. When I always talk to governments, they always tell me the same. We cannot impose if the supply chain is not ready. So it's a vicious circle, right? So one is passing to the other, and no one takes the lead. Yeah. So, but great reflection. Fahad, with you. Contractor hat, okay? Let's wear the contractor hat for a minute. Are contractors prepared to actually shift towards sustainable materials? What are the setbacks? What will help to drive large-scale adoption? And that's a question that I really want you to be specific. Are you ready or not?
First of all, I want to thank you, Zulema, for hosting all of us and an amazing panel. And thank you, everyone, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, for attending on such a cold morning in Riyadh, coming out for such a good cause, which is very close to our hearts. Profitability is one thing, and then doing something that for the generations to come that will never be able to pay you back is something, that really is above legislation, is above profitability, it's above, balance sheets and P&Ls. So it's a beautiful initiative taken, so I want to thank Construction Week for that. Coming to your question of the supply chain and who has to go first, as my brother Hussam said, it actually is the chicken and the egg, because if you think about it, that the contractors, why, as a contractor, you told me to wear the contracting hat, so why would I be building for a developer a building that is green, increasing my cost by, which the data from United States Green Building Council website says it's cost about 8 to 12% higher to construct a green structure as opposed to a non-green structure. So why would the contractor invest that extra money when there are no tax benefits or rebates or preferential treatment during the tender or time relaxations? Give me one good incentive for the contractor to invest that extra in there. And then the developer will say the same thing. So if Roshan is a developer and then Rital is a developer, Roshan will say, why am I spending that extra 10% and where Rital is not? But this is where we need to think of this whole sustainability as a bigger vision, because sustainability is not something that's going to pay you after 1 year or 2 years or 1 week or 2 days. The vision of Saudi Arabia, where the Crown Prince, His Royal Highness Prince Mohammed bin Salman, has clearly stated that we have a vision till 2060 to be net zero. So that's the canvas we need to look at sustainability. And we have to understand that, yes, it does make financial sense. It is a hard decision to take today, but the data from University of California, from USGBC, from LEED websites, pick it up and check it out, that the LEED certified buildings or BREEAM or whichever edge you want to follow your certification, they actually save you, just like Hussam and José said, 30% on your energy efficiencies. And now I don't want to get into details and numbers and chemicals and algorithms of how that happens, but just the design of these sustainable structures are maximizing the use of sunlight, for example, are doing water conservation, or actually reusing the water, harvesting the rainwater, and then using them in your flushes and irrigation systems. So you can reduce your water consumption by 30%. So that is commercial saving, right? That's what we're talking about. So why would the contractors do it? The developers and the contractors need to team up and collaborate, like these conferences give more of an information and pass the trend down to the industry leaders to sit down on a table and take a decision on this. It's a hard decision, but somebody has to take it. And as one of my mentors, Cody Sanchis, always says it's hard. Being obese is hard. Going to the gym is hard. Being miserable is hard. And going out and getting over it is hard. So we have to decide that, do we want to, destroying this planet is hard. Protecting the planet is hard. Which hard do we want to choose? This is the decision that somewhere sanity must prevail, and we need to come up as an industry, as a collaboration, as a one joint venture between contractor, developers, and the government to be on the same page and choose what hard do you want to be. So I really want to appreciate everybody that's in this room today, because you guys are here not for yourselves, but for generations that is going to come 40 years after probably we've all died. So hats off and an applause to everybody that's in this room. Thank you.
Great answer, but actually,
Amazing answer.
Are the contractors ready or not? Okay, well, look, you mentioned the big elephant in the room, which is the cost, right? And everyone talks short-term cost instead of long-term vision, as you mentioned. José was sharing with me yesterday when we were catching up about a case study that they did of Resinate, which is a very concrete product. Concrete, actually, it's quite funny. Concrete product in the market right now that is working in many other countries, right? So he did a case study, maybe you can develop that now, in ROSHN. So how much cost are we really increasing? Are we talking 5, 10%, or are we talking marginal cost increase? Maybe you can expand a little bit more, because I would like to have your views on this. If he tells me that it's a marginal increase, will the developers, will the contractors accept that marginal increase and then go for it? The floor is yours.
Yeah, well, I want to bring several concepts and comments
Yeah.
that my fellow panelist has been talking about. And, well, first of all, the market mentality is shifting. It's changing. But we also need to look, when we talk about a larger scale, we need to look about the improvement, in our case, on a long-term value proposition of, in our case, Resonate. So long-term is very important, right? Because when we talk about our product, we talk about building much more resilient and durable and energy-efficient infrastructure. So we need to understand that it actually complies and it brings value added. That's really important. The other thing is collaboration was mentioned. Collaboration is also part of what we do in our DNA. It's part of our name. So CRDC means Center for Regenerative Design and Collaboration. So we collaborate with several industry leaders. With CEMEX is one of them. We also, and officially, I'm going to share that this year we're going to commercially scale a new product that's going to be called, it's called Resonate Core. And we use, just to explain a little bit, we use Resonate as a filter, and we use the fumes from the cement industry. So we extract the CO2 from the fumes, and we get Resonate Core. And Resonate Core is quite different from a commercial viability perspective with Resonate, because Resonate replaces the natural aggregate in some portion, and Resonate Core is an additive. It actually brings a very high percentage improvement on resistance for concrete. So we are also collaborating with a company called Progreso. It's a very well-established position cement company in Latin America, has been buying capabilities of CEMEX throughout the region. And we are going to scale up with also PA Consulting, who co-developed this product. So collaboration in general is very important. Also, Fahad mentioned different certifications and regulatory frameworks. Like if we look into ESG goals, that makes companies really take a deep, specific look into the benefits of these materials, because they look for materials like this, recycled content materials, low carbon materials, just to comply with the reports. And so different concepts. And in regards of the case study, we did a case study based on Cerdá Phase 4 that ROSHN is developing. And just to keep it very straightforward, it only represented an increase in the cost budget of 0.11%. And we're talking about 2,505 homes. So it's a very marginal increase. But I also comply with my fellow panelists when we talk about governments and we talk about financial incentives. And that's really important, just to try to close that gap, at least in the beginning, to incentivize more the use of recycled content materials and low carbon materials.
Great, so it's marginal.
It's
I
marginal.
agree
So
with
now the
That's
question
the
back
key
to you
takeaway.
guys. Yeah, just to summarize, it's marginal. 0.11% is, I will say, is nothing compared to the amount of money that we are spending, isn't it? I don't know if you agree or not, but if I tell you this is the increase, will you then say, or will you then comply with, okay, you know what, I'm going to invest on this because my development is going to be greener and in the long term is going to be more cost efficient?
It is, Zulema, look, I fully agree with what Jose said, because in Saudi Arabia right now there's 1,178 LEED certified structures. AMAQ has built 4 of them, and the 5th one is ongoing. Our engineers that are building that are here in this very room, so if anybody wants to have a chat with them in terms of cost. So there is a data that is coming from universities and global organizations, and then there's data that I have in-house. So absolutely agree with what Jose said. There's not a huge difference, I would say 1 to 2% versus the traditional construction, because we're building those projects for one client and similar projects for other clients. So I have raw data with me where it fully complements with what is being said. It is not all that. It's a myth that needs to be broken about green building and green construction that is expensive. It's actually not expensive. It's the decision you have to just, if I put it into analogy, it's if you want to eat a Big Mac right now, you'll be very happy. But data does show that down the line, in a few years, you'll be spending a lot on your medical bills. If you want to go for a kale salad, yes, you might be spending a little bit higher right now, but data shows that you'll be spending less on your medical bills later. That's exactly, as a human body, is what you need to look at the building itself. If you're going to invest that, you're trying to save that 2% today and be happy about it, you're not going to be saving that 12 to 15% on the operational cost of that building annually, and then 40% ROI in the whole lifespan of the building. So until and unless we think of these things like that, they're never going to be able to come up with the decisions on whether to go green or whether to stay traditional.
Hussam?
Thank you. I just wanted to as a kind of feedback to what my two colleagues have mentioned about the additional costs to the developer. I'm just going to rephrase it or reframe it in a different way. 0.1%, 2%, it's all the same. It's additional incremental costs, and it somewhat compromises your IRR or your return on investment as a developer and so on. But what I want to highlight more is there's always going to be that kind of cost hump that developers have got to go over, on the way to scaling up that technology locally in Saudi Arabia. At the moment, there might be a couple of green cement producers in Saudi Arabia, but probably in 10 years, there'll probably be 100 or 1,000 of them. And with time and patience and building up that kind of production line and scalability, the price point comes down, and then you do look at the long-term reward. And as a developer, we just want to add that we don't look just at cost. We look at the overall value that this is bringing to us, especially for assets that we own and operate as ROSHN. So we look at the life cycle value that this introduces in terms of energy efficiency, energy improvements, the cost of cooling and so on. So, that's just a different perspective of looking at things.
I think, great perspective. I mean, cost is always often called as the first barrier, but in fact, and indeed what you said, that the developer is looking at a more holistic view, right? And just following up on you, Hussam, can we discuss the latest design trends in giga projects aligned with the efforts to reduce this carbon footprint?
Yeah, I mean, I believe you're all aware of trends that are the major trend in the last decade or so is, developers are looking at more energy efficient cooling systems. We're looking at better wall systems, better efficiency, But I think one of the things that it's most overlooked is the whole move, at least especially in the giga project lens, is the move towards off-site manufacturing. And beyond off-site, I think you're aware of, off-site is you're moving that construction process to a more safe indoor environment where you're doing things more efficiently, right? You're using less labor. We have one of the lowest labor productivity in the world here in the GCC region. So that movement towards factories will translate to a lot of efficiencies and from which we can reap the rewards. But in terms of another design trend that I want to talk about is the whole kit of parts approach to designing and delivering massive projects, right? If there's a small developer working on a 100-unit residential unit project or a small skyscraper, it's very different than looking at a program or a large portfolio of assets that have to come online within the next 10 years. So the way to do it, I'm very passionate about this, is the kit of part. It's basically establishing a Lego set, if I can simplify the discussion. You know, that predictable Lego set of tens of thousands of components, each component is known, so you're introducing a lot of certainty, repeatability, commonality, standardization extremely important, right? So from a sustainability perspective, you know, the kit of part approach is very ideal because we know every component's carbon footprint and environmental impact becomes more known and more certain. I'm going to give you a very simple example. If you look at this phone, you know, the Apple phone, this was designed using a kit of parts approach. There's not all of the parts are you know, unique. Some of them are bespoke in every model that you get. But in terms of construction house, you know, when you design and build a construction, a home, traditionally not using a kit of parts, so you're using a bespoke, let's say it's your dream home. If I were to ask you what would be the carbon footprint of this home, you wouldn't know where to start, right? But in terms of a kit of parts approach, you know that these parts, that's the product type, that's the environmental product declaration form that I've developed and you know, I mean, and fine-tuned every year. So that kind of development becomes much more predictable in terms of carbon footprint, and I think that's where major developers and large developers need to head towards.
You know, it's interesting how you started the answer by basically focusing that the design is purely focused on the operational carbon, right? How the building is going to behave in the long run. I always struggle with the fact that no one talks about the embodied carbon, which is how we built the building, and is one of the, I will say, if I compare the two, everyone is looking at the operational carbon, yet embodied carbon is not looked at, and that is a major, I will say, gap in the industry, and that's why products like Resinate could help to kind of balance operational carbon and embodied carbon. The other thing that you mentioned, and I really like, is like this control environment, right? Basically, you are bringing lean manufacturing into construction. I'm a lean manufacturing girl, by the way. I spent 10 years doing lean manufacturing, and literally is that repeatability, standardization, waste, removing the 7 wastes, you know, we all know about. I'm going to, I really like the answer, by the way. You know, but I think there is more to say in the in the embodied carbon. I wanted to come back to Jose for 1 second, and I wanted to keep it very brief due to the time. I know that you are partnered with Cemex. Cemex is the Mexican, we all know Cemex, right? The biggest concrete manufacturer in the world. And I would like you to maybe expand a bit on the partnership that you have with Cemex, because when it comes to the cost, Cemex is actually making or leading the way, you know, to say like, you know what, I'll take this increase in cost, but my product will be much better in the long run.
Yeah.
So
Well, first of all, I'm about to close a partnership here with ROSHN, because you know, your answer was very overwhelming. It was what we not usually hear from a developer. So, well, Cemex, they're an industry leader, and they're partners, and they, this type of partnerships actually help us to accelerate the adoption of products like Resinate into markets, because it's just connecting the product into their supply chain and production processes. So that helps a lot. So yeah, Cemex is one of several examples I can give, and it's also fair to say that Resinate is also been proven in very large-scale projects already. So yeah, well, I can share a lot of information, but
no, I just wanted to highlight the fact that players like Cemex, you know, industry leaders are recognizing this type of, you know, new technology, and they wanted to jump into it before no one else, right? Yeah. I think Cemex in the region is also expanding quite a lot, so that will be great for you guys. Okay, last topic of the panel will be barriers to scale up. And now touching on the Cemex, I wanted to go to you, Fahad, contracting hat again, please. And you know, we always hear from contractors that they struggle with material availability and supply chain consistency, you know, while integrating these greener alternatives. What will help ensure more reliable adoption from you guys?
Definitely, supply chain is a challenge. for not just in terms of the material availability, even the academic level of the consultants or the contractors available to build green structures. There is a scarcity because it's a trend that is still building up. As I said, I always say this on panel discussions where invited or closed circle discussions, that there is a lot of talk and a lot of noise about sustainability, but the truth is that there's only 185,000 certified green structures according to LEED, 500K according to BREEAM. So are we less than a million despite all of this noise? So something is misaligned somewhere. So this is where, 49% of the countries don't even have a green building code. Saudi got ours in 2021 with the Saudi Green Initiative announced by the Crown Prince. And I would second what Hussam said about modular construction and using the AI and technology, metaverse, augmented reality, and combining all of that with the blockchain technology to reduce the inefficiency. See, you can have a very nice building and call it sustainable, but if it has 1,000 square meter space worth of doing nothing, I wouldn't call that a sustainable structure, because space optimization is a key role of if you want to call that structure sustainable or not. So developing things in a factory environment and then shipping them off, digital twinning and bringing them offsite reduces, in terms of design when you're using metaverse or digital twinning, reduces the variations. And variation is lost efficiencies. And researching earlier in the year, I saw that construction industries waste about $1.5 billion a year in lost efficiencies due to non-utilization of these technologies, where manufacturing has really scaled their game up in terms of adapting to technology. Construction has not. $1.5 billion is a Burj Khalifa every year that we're wasting. And then we want to call ourselves sustainable. So just to put things into
really like that
perspective. Yeah, just to put the analogy so people understand. I met people here who were not from the construction industry, so I want to keep it in as simple words as possible for them to understand. And so yeah, I would want to know how many people in this room are consultants that are supporting people for LEED certifications or sustainable certifications of any sort. Wouldn't be many, because there are consultants that we can count on our fingertips. So yes, not only is the material availability a scarce resource at the moment, but there's also the academic challenges of not enough contractors, not enough workers, not enough consultants who are able to take this whole thing forward. And that is why there's a cost impact on that, because demand and supply, it's a simple rule. So we do source a lot of materials that are sustainable, but at the same time, there needs to be much more education in the industry, where as a whole, in terms of design as well as build, on how to take this thing forward. And that's not going to come, as I always say, without a mass legislation from the top. It has to be from top down. Either we do it, or the law comes where you will be then mandated to do it. But it has to be done.
Yeah, and a great question, and a great finisher liner, I will say, is for you, Hussam. How do you envision this collaboration? You mentioned all of you mentioned collaboration. I think this is the collaboration that we can put the efforts on. So how do you envision collaboration between governments, manufacturers, and contractors in accelerating the adoption of more sustainable modern methods of construction and materials?
I think I believe everyone has a role to play. As I said earlier, and as my colleague Fahad mentioned, the government is doing good work. They've established the Modern Building Initiative. I think you guys are aware of that, under MoMA. And what they're doing is very good work in terms of funding and financing and assisting manufacturers, both locally and from abroad, to set up shop in Saudi Arabia and establish and certify technologies, by the way, that they're fit for use locally and so on. I think they're also looking at green concrete. The other thing that a government is doing, should be doing also, or increasing that work stream, is the policies and the regulatory framework. I've always mentioned that, there could be a mandate, for example, it's not a foregone conclusion, but there could be a mandate for residential developers, for example, to deliver 50% of their homes using off-site methodologies, right? This doesn't mean that this home is going to be a completely modular home built off-site, but it means 50% of the components of the home should be pre-manufactured. And I think we're almost there. As ROSHN, 35% of our homes are now done in a precast factory, in an off-site location. We're looking to increase that steadily towards 70% by 2030. But I think also in terms of, as you mentioned, Zulema, the contractors and manufacturers. The manufacturers, they can look at increasing their production capability, bringing on Saudi talent, and making sure that the talent is also there to man these manufacturing facilities. They could be looking at PPP, public-private partnerships. I think there's a lot of traction and movement in that front these days. And finally, contractors, and sorry, just to go back to manufacturers also, manufacturers can also improve their marketing skills, by the way. Maybe not for materials, but for construction methodologies. That's been one of their gaps in the last 10 years, is that they haven't marketed their products in a way that's favorable by the general masses and by home buyers and so on. And I think that's where they need to do more work. Contractors, I believe they have to be upskilling. They have to be looking at how can we do things better, what is really in demand, especially in large projects or giga projects, It's that movement towards more digital transformation, more BIM adoption, upskilling their workforce and positioning them as the next generation assemblers, because that's the role that contractors are going to be taking when we shift from traditional to more modern methods of construction. It's the role of the contractor moving from a general traditional contractor to more of an assembler on site, and that takes more skills and other new skills that are coming online, new equipment and new capabilities and so on. So they all have to play their part, and I think we're all headed towards the same goal, the Vision 2030, the goals on sustainability, the goals on industrialization, and so on. So I think we're going in the right direction.
Perfect.
And I think building on, sorry, Zulema, and while we're talking about recommendations, I would think that really if legislations that can come in and support the contractors and the developers as well. For example, they can give, like manufacturing industry, for example, has over here the residential costs for contractors are 12,000 riyals per year per guy, right? Per individual. But the manufacturers have it for 700. So if the government can come in and say, look, if you're a contractor, you're a builder, you're going to build this many green structures a year, or that much percentage of your revenue annually has to be towards green building or green, automatically these 244,000 registered contractors in Saudi Arabia are going to shift towards.
Absolutely.
I mean, we are one of the 244,000 and we've built 4 structures. So imagine a 0.0001% of contractors that are adapting to this whole green thing, right? But if you come up with or allow them some relaxations in your VAT, not reducing the VAT amount, but giving them flexible payment terms to pay their VAT. Incentivize them somehow, and this is all under discussions with MOMRA and the different organizations that we sit with. And so what's going to happen eventually is not going to affect the balance sheet of the government because you're still getting your VAT, but it's going to help the contractors and the builders towards building sustainable and green structures, which is then going to eventually come back and feed the residents of Saudi Arabia and the citizens of Saudi Arabia in the long run. So these are the little things that, and there are much more ideas that, you can allow them preferential treatments in the tenders, you can allow them preferential treatments in their income taxes. Right now you're paying 20%, make it 18%. If you build all your 80% structures annually as green, it's just gonna be, you're saving 2% there from the income tax, but the contractor will be investing that into your economy again, building a safer future for your children to come.
Great. I'm conscious about the time, and I think they are looking at me. Is there any time for questions? Yes?
We started 15 minutes late, so we can kill it.
Yeah. Any questions in the room? Sorry, I cannot see. Come on, guys. We have a great lineup of panelists. Of course. Mm-hmm.
Thank you. And it's difficult for them to transform. So what would be for you the number one, maybe solution that we could all take away to talk about to help not these people falling back into the old habits, being judged only on cost? And then the second point is, how do we lock the good initiatives? That's also a difficult side. You have a success story somewhere. And I think, Jose, if I understand well what you are doing, you know, it would be a no-brainer. You're directly adaptable for the, you know, the market. You're bringing a new solution that works. So why not use it? So why can we not lock solutions like that and make sure that it's continuously used and not reinventing the wheels every time and then fall back in the old habits?
Thank you very much for the question. Great question. I think the reason why they're not adapting to it, honestly, is because there is a lack of government, or globally, the governments to mandate the contractors and the builders to do it. Right now, it's still considered as a luxury, which it is not. But that's the perception that we have for green buildings. And that is actually what pays later on, because the buyer of your apartment or the villa, for example, in ROSHN, knowing that this is a green structure, has a perception, and he'll be happy to pay 10 to 12% higher for that villa, because he knows that if this is being developed with the care for something so special, such as sustainability and green and future, then I'm sure that they haven't compromised on quality elsewhere. So that's the perception that actually pays you at the end of the day. And how we can continue building on this, I think it has to be both by global governments, as well as I think emotional factor needs to be there as well. We need to teach school kids about how important the sustainability is. And I always say that we're a Muslim country, and our Prophet Muhammad ﷺ has a hadith where he said, back 1,500 years ago, that if you have a plant in your hand and you're about to plant it, and the horn gets blown for the day of judgment, and you still have time to plant it, then plant it. So that's the aggression and the attention to detail and the intention that you need towards, I mean, plantation is the easiest way to reduce carbon emissions and more oxygen in the air. But that's just one thing. I'm just saying that people need to understand that it's not just corporate social responsibility, it's also our faith, our religious responsibility. And then if you do that from 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. every day, you make the money, you get called the good guy, and you still go to heaven. So it's a win-win.
Can I build that just pretty fast?
Yeah, pretty fast.
I just agree 100%. And I think that the one transformative change that we can get is the mandating of minimum sustainable requirements in construction tenders. So, you know, they can prioritize the use of recycled content materials and low carbon materials, but there's a very long discussion and interesting around education that we actually go through, in our case, CRDC Foundation, with a educational curriculum, going to schools and teach them about regeneration and being part of the ecosystem. That's really important.
Thank you. I mean, these are very good quick wins. You know, when you elicit regulatory support and government incentives, you know, that's a win-win situation. And I think, you know, last but not least is building that cultural shift, right? So, especially on modern methods of construction, you know, the gentleman said, you know, how do we make sure that contractors are changing and, you know, sticking to? I think it's making that cultural shift of positioning themselves as next-gen, forward-thinking, progressive, and I think that's a win situation for them to win other tenders, you know. So it's you know, changing the mindset and the culture. Very, very important as well.
And just to finalize and to close, for me, it's just, we talk about sustainability all the time. We talk about modern methods of construction. It should be normalized right now, right? After like I don't know how many years we have been talking about this. Modern methods for me are not modern anymore. They are methods of construction. Sustainability should be part and embedded into the organization mindset.
I agree.
Yeah.
I agree.
So thank you very much, guys.
Thank you so much.
It was a pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.